You guys remember back months ago when we made that simple worm bin? I did that video because I wanted to help people start what I have come to find one of the most useful tools in my gardening setup, which is those castings. Well, if you went ahead and made yourself a worm bin around the time that I released that video, you may be ready to start harvesting those castings. So guess what? That's what we're doing today, showing you what can happen in just about six and a half months time, depending on how you fed your worms. Okay guys, look, that opener was kind of a catch-22 if you really want to know the truth, because it really does depend on how you fed your worms and how often you fed your worms. So I tend to, not always, but for the most part, I either chop up the food very finely from when I feed them, or I will freeze their food first. That way, when I throw it into the bin, not only does it provide the moisture from the foods that I'm adding, but it also breaks down faster because the cell walls have all been broken through the freezing process. So now that we've got to this situation and point that I'm able to harvest castings, I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how I go about doing that, but more importantly, what I leave behind. Because what you take out is important, but also, and I believe even more important, is what you leave behind. So let's go ahead and get into this harvest video and see what all we've got to do and how much work is involved. Now I will, hold on, before we go, I will tell you, you do not need to go to the same extent that I do. Everybody's setup is going to be different. And depending on how you've, like I said, fed them, added bedding, checked on the moisture, there's a lot of things going into it. But my way is not the only way. So please, as you watch, keep that in the back of your mind, that just because you see me do it doesn't mean that you have to do it. Okay? All right, let's go. So what we're going to do now is we've got to take the castings, which are in the bucket, and we're going to be putting them in here. And the reason we're doing that is so that we can dry out these castings, because right now they're just way too wet to be able to sieve in an easy way. So also doing it outside just because I want to get them to dive down, the worms to dive down underneath. And then it's not going to be staying outside, it's going to be in my garage to dry out, which I will go out and periodically check from time to time to, you know, ensure that A, it's drying out, B, the worms aren't figuring out how to get out of the bin, and C is to make sure that when it's ready to go, I know and I can harvest. So let's go ahead and dump these out. We're going to just dump them at first, and then we'll pick them out with my gloves. Okay, so that's a good amount of them so far, and you can see that there's all kinds of them in here, and this stuff is nice and blocky from, you know, castings, and there's obviously going to be leaf matter still in here. I have fluffed it a few times, which is just adding oxygen. We haven't got all the worms out yet, or all the castings out yet, but there's still plenty in here, so we're going to get these all out now. This is also a good reason why I say you need to watch your moisture control, because I think what happened was I was feeding this and I thought it felt a little light as far as lightweight, and the other ones were a little bit heavier, they felt like to me. So I added a little bit of water to this, and I'm now realizing that nope, this one wasn't a special bin. I didn't need more water. It was fine the way it was. I just needed to fluff up the bin some to redistribute the moisture that was in there everywhere. And adding that water, all it did was sink straight to the bottom and keep the bottom overly saturated, which is now the issue that I'm having to worry about dealing with. Okay, that's most of them out. I'm not going to take you guys through the whole thing of me trying to get that completely clean, but see, these are just so wet. There's just nothing you can really do with these right now. So as the worms dive down, we will probably every couple of days go out in the garage, fluff it up to mix everything up so that it evenly dries out. They should be fine. I'm not gonna dry it down to the point where it's like dust or nothing like that. It just wants to have a subtle dampness to it. That way we can sift it and not have to take so much extra work just to get it to work through. This stuff is just way too wet. This clip here is after, I'd say, about 6 or 7 days of drying out in the garage. And as you can maybe try to see, these castings are a good bit drier than when they were when I first pulled them out of the bin. I wouldn't say that they're 100% where I'd like them to be, but they're close, so that's good enough. All right, here we are. Now I'm taking the partially dried down castings, and this is my first sift through the material itself. Now I want you to pay attention that once I start actually sifting, I do this fast. And that's because I'm going to take multiple passes at this, and each time I do it, I'm trying to get rid of certain things. So on this first series of passes that I'm going pretty quick, the whole goal here is only to keep out as many of the worms as possible and not to take out, too much of the bedding, which is the stuff that will not go through. Now, if they were drier, I might actually get more of the overs and some more of the castings out, but at the same time, I would also probably get more worms down into there. So that's all I'm doing right now, is just doing it quickly. That way I'm traumatizing the worms as little as possible, as well as getting fewer worms down into what's been sifted out. So that makes my job later on, when, we get to finer and finer material, easier, because I don't have to worry about so many worms being in it. This is what the castings look like after this first pass. And while it looks like there's quite a bit here, really it's about maybe half of the bin that was, or the material that was there, has been sifted through. And I'll be showing you here in a little bit how much is still left of the bedding inside the bucket with the worms. But right now I'm just checking the moisture, seeing whether or not I need to let it dry some more before I process it a second time, or if they are good to go. On the left you can see before I sifted out the worms, and on the right is after, and you can see a marked reduction of the amount of worms that are just randomly in this material, and that is purposefully done for the very next steps that I'm getting ready to show you guys. All I'm doing right here is just rearranging everything, taking the castings that I've already sifted twice and just getting them positioned so that they'll be the ones that I sift out next back into this tray. A little bit of hindsight here, I guess, because I didn't really set myself up for, going through this in one smooth motion, but, so all I'm doing here is putting the sifted castings into this container, and then you'll see me take the bedding and worms and put them into the container I'm emptying. That way I can take the castings that are going into the bucket and putting it back into the round containers, so I can go ahead and sift everything out. Just to save a little bit of time, I'm going to go ahead and cut to after I've got all these worms here back into the container that is their bin, and give you a close-up, like I said, of the worms as they are back in their bedding and their bin. Okay, this is a look at what was put back into the container that the worms live in, and you can't see a whole lot of worms initially. I'll fix that for you here in just a minute, but what I wanted to draw your attention to was where top of the castings were compared to where they are now. So if you look about there, you've got about half of the bin that was harvested. It looks like it's a little bit more just because there's a lot of air in there now and it's not compacted like it was. But that's what I'm shooting for, is about half of the bin, and that's about it. That's all you really need, in my opinion. It's not necessarily what everybody does, but I like to always leave about half of the bin in there. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit better look. There we go, the worms. And no, they're not too, moving around that much. They're there, and they'll be fine once they get some food and, fresh bedding. Alright, I just wanted to give you guys a real good clip of me sifting out these castings for the first time using the 1/8-inch sift, which this case is this fry basket. Now, the castings are still on a little bit too damp side, but it's still working, as you see here. So I do end up waiting for these to dry out after I run it through the first time to run them a second time just to make sure I am able to get all the castings out. But I just wanted to give you a quick look, and we'll fast forward to afterwards. Once we've done through that screen right there, this is what's going through, or what's not going through. This is the overs for that size of a mesh. So we know it's less than 1/4 inch, but it's more than 1/8 of an inch. And compared to this, that is just really, really tiny, that's still, there are going to be some bedding and whatnot, but majority of this is castings, and it's going to be, for the most part, free of worms. There might be a few wisps that make it through. Wisps is just another word for baby worms. So you may find some here, but that doesn't bother me. I just liked having this for certain applications. This will be ran twice. The reason why is because it's still a little wet, which is why I said we needed to dry it down in the very beginning. So once this gets sifted through the first time, I will set it off, let it dry out a while I store these castings in this container here, and then I will reprocess these again into here, and then whatever's still left over after we've done that second, I use these castings as a top dress for my outside beds, like anything that's in ground. I'll even do some of my container pots with it. It's really, really good for that. Or like whenever you top dress with fertilizer, the fertilizer I will put down first, then I will put this over top of the fertilizer and then water it in, because the microbial and bacterial environment that these castings have will help break down the fertilizer faster. So that's just how I use it, and I figured I just wanted to show you guys this because there is a difference between this and then that. Alright guys, here we are, finished product after today's sifting. So this is the fine sifted worm castings that we did through the frying basket compared to what was left over from that frying basket. Now I'm gonna let these dry down for probably a day or two, because these are still at the edge of what's siftable. So while this might not seem like a lot, it's because this is still a little too damp. So after a day or two, I'll let that dry out some more, and then I'll give this one more pass, and then whatever goes through here becomes castings that I will use in my fine sift collection, and then whatever remains will be the ones that's designated for top dressing. So we've made it from, making our bin to sifting out our bin. If you didn't catch it in the video, the most important part that I was alluding to in the very beginning is what you leave behind. And that is, never harvest more than 50% of your worm bin. And that doesn't mean that, oh, only take out castings out of half of it, and then you can do that if you want to. I mean, it'll probably wind up in the same position, but the way I harvest it is like I showed you. And you know what? A lot of that's going to also be what they call vermicompost, which isn't necessarily straight castings. Those are small broken down materials that resemble castings, but you can no longer tell what they were. So that is what I pull out. And throughout my sifting process, I try to sift out as much of those castings so I can use those as castings. And then a lot of the stuff that you saw that was overs, I use that as my vermicompost, which still obviously has castings. It might have cocoons. There could be worms. There could be a lot of things that are still left in it that will break down in the bed. So again, you can go straight, just take a handful straight out of your worm bin and utilize it in the garden or in a pot or wherever. Or you could be a little crazy like me and sift out, classify the particulate matter into sizes, because that's essentially what I did. That way I can use it for different applications. So for instance, the finely sifted castings, I will use those for seed starting. I will use it in bumping up my seedlings, and then I will also use it for worm casting extract, which is just a quick soak those castings in water and extract the nutrients that are in it, and then take what's left that's not water soluble and you throw it back into the worm bin. Or for instance, my overs. I know I've said it in the video, but those I use and I top dress with the granular fertilizer when I'm using it to help break down the fertilizer faster, plus also adding the nutrients that are still there in the overs for the pot that I'm doing it in, and it also acts as a mulch layer too. So that's my reasonings. You can do whatever you want. There's no wrong way to do it as long as you're growing and you're harvesting castings or utilizing the waste that would be put into the trash. Instead, you're feeding it to the worms. That's all that matters. So for today, I'm your boy, Big Wheel Dog, 82. In the soil, literally with the worms, y'all. And I'm out here. See ya.